Hi, let me tell you a bit about some books that I've been reading. The first one is Genome, the autobiography of a species in 23 chapters. So this is a popular science book about genetics, and it's sort of an entry-level book. You don't need any knowledge beyond like high school biology or chemistry. If you know what a gene is and you remember what DNA is, then you're all set. The book is structured around its 23 chapters. There's one chapter per chromosome, and then for each chromosome, sort of the author picks one gene in particular to focus on it, to talk about at length. So he describes, where the gene is, what it looks like, what its function is, and what can go wrong when you suffer a mutation. The chapters are also thematically differentiated, so there's a couple chapters talking about memory and intelligence, about senescence and death, about sex and sort of reproduction. You can imagine those are important topics when it comes to heritability. And I think the weakest bits of the book are sort of the latter part, because those chapters are not about any gene in particular, but the book sort of veers into speculative territory, and it goes into musings about bioethics, which I don't have a problem with, but there are no groundbreaking, thought-provoking analyses there, so I could have done without that part. So if you're pretty knowledgeable about the subject, I would say you're not going to get much out of it. For instance, if you're a med student or something. But if you're a complete dilettante, I think it's a good entry point, a good gateway drug into genetics, and it'll probably pique your interest in reading more on the topic. It certainly did that for me, and I ended up on a Wikipedia rabbit hole at 3 a.m, so I recommend it. Okay, the second one I want to talk about is How Democracies Die, What History Reveals About Our Future. So Nick Cohen from The Observer says, excellent, scholarly, readable, alarming, and level-headed. To be honest, I kind of disagree. Scholarly and readable, it certainly is. Excellent and level-headed, not so much. The point of the book is that the authors are trying to develop a litmus test for autocracy. How do you recognize a country that's on the path towards dictatorship? And they do that by sort of looking at the way leaders interface with the different facets of state power, things like the electoral system, the economy, mass media, the judiciary, the Supreme Courts, and in what ways can leaders manipulate these to gain power and to limit human rights and fundamental freedoms. In some ways, the central thesis of the book, which was written in 2019, so a couple of years into Trump's presidency, is that Donald Trump is sort of eroding America's democratic system, that he's undermining the American Constitution. And I would say in hindsight, now being in 2022, even after the Capitol riots and the elections that were supposedly stolen, I think America has proven to have a much more robust democracy than a lot of people give it credit. So Donald Trump didn't have the most democratic attitudes towards many issues. He used to label any media outlet he disagreed with as fake news. I remember when he was supposed to visit Denmark to meet the Danish Prime Minister, supposedly wishing to buy Greenland. He threw a tantrum when the Danish Prime Minister told him that's off the table, and he cancelled the meeting. So the guy was complete bonkers, but obviously he wasn't a dictator. The book comprises of sort of historical analysis of failed democracies in Europe and the Americas, a particularly post-war period. And I think those are the best bits of the book, most informative, the most well written, but I don't know if the book is worth buying just for that. I think there are plenty of other accounts that are more thorough, better documented, especially since the book is barely over 200 pages. So I don't think it's worth the price of admission. So no recommend. Okay, the last one I want to mention is The Terror. Now, this is a historical fiction novel written by Dan Simmons, and it is based on the real-life failed Franklin expedition when two British ships, the Erebus and the Terror, left England around the mid-1800s in search for the Northwestern Passage. This was a potential trade route along northern Canada. The ships never made it back, and the crew were never to be heard from again. So Dan Simmons tells the story of their imagined demise through the eyes of a few main characters, and he adds a twist of horror. So not only are they fighting the elements, but there is a mysterious creature, a monster, hunting them down. So the premise sounds a bit silly, but it becomes obvious that the real horror of the story stems from what these people are going through. They most likely have gone through starvation, hypothermia, scurvy. The novel is shockingly hard to read. I mean, I winced constantly when reading about their bleeding gums and their bruises and their blisters. It's quite disgusting and distressing. I think the book is also beautifully written. It's not just one of those airport lounge novels that you read on the plane and you throw away as soon as you landed. It's also a massive boy. It's around 800 pages, but I just couldn't put it down. It was truly gripping, and I thoroughly loved it. And in fact, there is a TV miniseries called The Terror. It's based on the book, and if you don't have patience for the novel, I highly recommend the series. Great cast, excellent cinematography, somewhere around 8 or 10 episodes. So either the book or the series, highly recommended. Okay, thanks for watching and see you next week.